I agree with the problem, okay? I am very concerned about the solution, okay? The practicality of the solution. In other words, I think that this is going to create not only the problem, the capital markets problem that I'm talking about. I think that we don't understand how the cycle goes because it comes along about once a lifetime. But there are orders, there are systems, and the systems break down for certain reasons, and it creates cycles. For example, there's a monetary system, and then there's a debt cycle. And so as a result, we now have, one man's debts, another man's assets. And when you build these up and you get to a point where you can't sustain that, you have a debt issue. We have a debt issue. We can get into that. But there's a monetary cycle. There's a internal political order cycle that takes us from one political order to another political order, in which there's then classically great turbulence between the left and the right. And because of disorder, particularly in democracies, there's a lot of fighting because there needs to be cooperation, compromise, and so on. And we're in the process of changing that order. In addition, we have the international world order. International world order began in 1945. There's a war. You win a war. The dominant powers get to set the rules. That was a series of multilateralism, things like the United Nations, World Trade Organization, World This and World That. And that multilateralism is then breaking down for unilateralism for the same reasons. So there are these three orders related to too much debt. Debt is money. Second, internal order. How does our system work? Who's going to get control of this problem? And then number three, in addition of the five main forces, there's also throughout history, climate, acts of nature. Droughts, floods, and pandemics have killed more people and toppled more orders. And then there's also throughout history, man's inventiveness and new technologies, which is creating this transformative result.
Right.
The interactions of these is what going on. So if we look at tariffs represent a dealing with the imbalances. The imbalance means we have a tremendous capital imbalance and a tremendous trade imbalance, which is unsustainable. And so that's the backdrop of this. Related to that is also the international conflict. How do you have dependency, mutual dependency? How can the United States be a safe country and not manufacture things and have to import them for China? Or how can China be safe in terms of having capital, an American capital? Those connections are breaking down. Well, mechanistically, it raises costs. It lowers revenues for companies. I mean, what does it mean for a company? It means costs are going to go up, revenue is going to go down, and capital is going to be harder to come by. And so, and then we're trying to replace manufacturing. I mean, I agree with the problems, okay, about the fact that we don't manufacture and that there is a problem with that. But there's a structural problem of whether we can manufacture. We have a population that basically 3 million people, 1% of the population, is incredibly brilliant. I mean, they go to the best schools, they come out, they make the unicorns, inventiveness, half of which, by the way, are foreigners. And at the same time, they are making the unicorns. At the same time, what we have is 10% of the population around them that's doing very well. The 60% of the population has below a sixth grade reading level. And it's tough to be productive. So when we agree with the problem, too much debt, Secretary Bennett and others agree we should get it down to 3%. We have to get the budget deficits down to 3% of GDP. This is not, we all agree on the problem. The question is, what do we do about it? How do you create that self-sufficiency? And so from a practical point of view, that manufacturing is very difficult under this sort of circumstances to create within the United States, yet it's needed. I agree with the problem, okay? I am very concerned about the solution, okay? The practicality of the solution. In other words, I think that this is going to create not only the problem, the capital markets problem that I'm talking about related to prices going up, costs going up, prices, revenue going down, and capital problem. But I also think that this is going to create great sand in the gears of production worldwide. At the same time, I do agree that this interdependency, this issue of productivity in the world in which we have to be competitive and productive, and we're not competitive in producing things, is a longer term problem, not an easy one. And I do expect that it is going to have political consequences. This is the nature of the cycle. It is coming also at the same time as we have a budget issue. Now, the budget issue is a comparably important issue. So as we look ahead in the months ahead, we have to get the budget deficit down to 3% of GDP. I worry about that at the same time as this is happening. These are not easy problems to solve, I'm concerned, because the bigger problems exist. The debt exists. You can't get around the debt. The overspending exists. You still have that. You still have that competitiveness issue. These have repeated throughout history. We're in a period that's very much like the 1930s. I'm not ideological. I'm like a mechanic. And so when we're talking about this, I'm saying that China now, I'm agreeing with you. China now manufactures more than the United States, Germany, and Japan combined. It's a dominant competitive manufacturer in the world. And we have lost manufacturing. And we are then creating, we're the biggest consumers in the world. And so through this, we're financing that consumption with a lot of debt. So we have a very, very difficult situation. The supply, foreign investors as a group have large exposures in their portfolios, outsized exposures to debt in general, and to have too much in terms of U.S. debt. The quantity that we have to sell them, which is about 6.5% of GDP, is an amount that they don't want to buy, partially because they have too much, partially because also now this is a risky world for various reasons. Worries about sanctions. This all happened in the 30s, you know, the conflict between Japan and the United States and freezing assets, sanctions and such things enter into it. So there's a supply-demand imbalance, the quantity that exists of debt and the quantity that has to be sold of debt. That's just the supply-demand imbalance. Exactly. But there are two ways you lower interest rates. Yeah. You lower interest rates by improving the supply-demand balance, or you lower interest rates by forcing them down and printing a lot of money. Those are the two ways, right? So there are three parts of the balance that we should think of. There's spending, there's taxes, and then there's interest cost. And if they were to lower achieve a better balance, and I'm not saying which way to do it, that's political, that's up to them. But if they were to improve the supply-demand balance, that would lower interest rates in a fundamentally sound way, and that would make the deficit. Right. So there are three ways that you can achieve that 3% of GDP target that I believe needs to be shot at. But Ray, you just can't make interest rates go down. It's not healthy to make interest rates, force them down by creating unnaturally low interest rates and printing a lot of money. Right. So that's key. I don't want to come on your show and market time and say buy, sell, and something. Here's what I want to tell the public, and so on. You have to have a balanced, well-diversified program and a game plan that you carry through over time. In my period of time of being an investment manager, I've seen the World Trade Center go down. I've seen 2008. I've been through all of those. The most important thing is to be able to have a well-balanced, diversified portfolio that exists. And how to do that is a subject. I just put out a course. I won't get into it. But how to diversify. Also understand what you don't know. By understanding that you can't time the market, you're not going to be successful. You're going to react emotionally. So what you should do, what I started to do when I was, didn't have the financial resources, I think, how much money do I have saved if I didn't get any money coming in? How many months could I live on the money that I have? How many months? And then how many years could I live on the money that I have? And then I divide it in half if it goes down 50%. Once you're in that position where you can establish your safety in terms of a diversified portfolio, that diversified portfolio means don't think cash is safe, because cash is the worst investment that you can make over a period of time. And you have to look at your buying power in inflation adjusted terms. And so, for example, if the Federal Reserve drives down the price of cash and prints money, you're going to lose buying power, as you have recently lost buying power as a result of doing that. So have a well-diversified portfolio, and also be very concerned about the debt issue.